You're listening to the Quint's podcast.
Almost 6 months after filing an FIR to probe into the quote-unquote large-scale conspiracy behind the Northeast Delhi violence, the Delhi police has filed a charge sheet against 15 anti-CAA protesters that run into 11 volumes spread across 17,000 pages. Over the past few months, the conspiracy alleged by the police has formed the core of its investigation into the riots. And according to the charge sheet, the conspiracy has been centered around 3 WhatsApp groups. First, JNU student Sharjeel Imam's Muslim Students of JNU or MSG group. Second, the Jamia Coordination Committee or the JCC, which is alleged to be in the middle of this multi-layered conspiracy. And the third one is the Delhi Protest Support Group led by several well-known anti-CAA activists, including United Against Hate and Pinjra tour members. So, what do we know about these WhatsApp groups? What are the allegations being made by the police? And are there still discernible gaps in the police's claims? To answer some of these questions on this podcast, I'll be shortly joined by senior correspondent of the Quint, Aishwarya S. Iyer, who's been closely following and reporting on the Delhi riots investigation for the last several months. You're tuned in to The Big Story, the podcast where we dissect the headline-making news for you. And I'm your host, Shorbori. Among the 15 people named in the charge sheet are United Against Hate founder Khalid Saifi and suspended Aam Aadmi Party councillor Tahir Hussain, both of whom have been alleged of planning violence in cahoots with former JNU student Umar Khalid, who was arrested recently. All 3 have been booked under the UAPA, however, Umar Khalid hasn't been named in this charge sheet. 5 other names missing from this charge sheet are that of Sharjeel Imam, Danish Parvez, Ilyas, and Faisal Khan, all of whom have been arrested but not named. Some other names that feature in this charge sheet are anti-CAA protesters Gulfisha Fatima, Natasha Narwal and Devangana Kalita, who've all been in custody after being booked under UAPA. There are also names of current and former Jamia students like Safura Zargar, who managed to secure bail in June. Some locals from Northeast Delhi have been named too. Now, coming to the conspiracy, where the police theory starts from is a WhatsApp group made by Sharjeel Imam, which is the MSG group that we've already mentioned before, that was created on 5th December 2019, one day after the Cabinet Committee gave its nod to present the Citizenship Amendment Bill in the Parliament. According to a message quoted by the police, this group was formed to, quote, facilitate coordination amongst Muslim organizations in their struggle against the NRC and the CAB, end quote. Now, coming to 15 December 2019, when one of the first instances of violence was reported in Delhi over anti-CAA protests. This was the day, if you remember, when the Delhi police was accused of forcefully entering the Jamia campus and charging at students. But the police claimed that Sharjeel Imam, along with co-conspirators, including members of MSJ, instigated students, which led to a riot and attack on police officials. But there are some interesting details in this part of the charge sheet, and I'll let Aishwarya take over.
Yeah, so, there's a riot-like situation and all of that. Now, why this is a very interesting time for not only the Delhi police's narrative regarding the conspiracy behind the Delhi riots, but also the history of the anti-CAA protests is because this is when the blockade, and the Shaheen Bagh protest began, the 24/7 protests. Now, why this is interesting is because the police in their charge sheet have claimed that the local residents of Shaheen Bagh were initially against the protest, but Sharjeel Imam threatened them with dire consequences if they did not yield to his demand or pose any obstruction to his roadblock plan. The protesters who blocked the road of Shaheen Bagh in the initial days were not local residents. That's what the police is alleging. They've used, to back this claim, they've used chats between Sharjeel and another woman, this woman called Afreen Fatima, where Sharjeel is basically saying that, local people had come to him, muftis and imams of the area had come to him and wanted and told Sharjeel to stop the blockade. But he had said that, there were 200 local boys around and 200 from JNU who were going to show up. Interesting here, all the more it's random that the police would make this allegation that the locals didn't want it when Sharjeel did say that there were 200 locals who were also a part of the protest, but also more so because, weeks later, Sharjeel Imam called off the protest. This is weeks after it began. But it was the locals who refused to move, who refused to end the blockade and continued it up to March 2020. when it was withdrawn, not due to any kind of pressure, but because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
So where Umar Khalid, Safura Zargar, Miran Haider and others come in are in the second WhatsApp group, that is the Jamia Coordination Committee or the JCC. This WhatsApp group has been described as the brainchild of Umar Khalid and Nadeem Khan. Its main constituents were SIO, Pinjra, AAJMI, SFI, JSF, etc. In its own words, the JCC had said that it's been formed with the agenda of, quote, responsibly organizing non-violent protests and sharpening the struggle against CAA and NRC. End quote. But what the police seems to be alleging is that all that's a falsehood and that the group was meant to discuss, quote, strategies, schemes and plans in furtherance of common conspiracy, end quote. So how does all this connect to the riots of February 2020? And we go back to Aishwarya here.
Yeah, so what is the connection? The police is basically trying to say here that members of Pinjra, of SIO, of the Jamia Coordination Committee in particular, all of them who they consider to be key conspirators of the violence, had learned their lessons from the violence that happened in December 2019 and therefore carefully chose Northeast Delhi. And I'll read from the chart sheet, with its unique, in quotes, with its unique economic, social and demographic matrix as being the ideal ground for mass-scale mobilization and violence, as it was found to be much more vulnerable than Southeast Delhi. So the police is saying that they picked Northeast Delhi for its vulnerable position. The police has also then made, drawn distinctions and similarities between the December 2019 violence and the February 2020 violence. Now, for example, in similarities, they have that all the hotspots of December 2019 were repeated with varying intensities later. Secondly, the modus operandi is a textbook copy of each other. First, there is mobilization, then there is incendiary speeches, which were followed by chakka jam and violence. Almost every character who gained notoriety in February 2020 had been noticed as being present in December 2019 incidents, the police is saying, and that the primary targets of both the periods under reference were the same, being the police personnel followed by non-Muslim population. These are the similarities, according to the police, of course. And when it comes to the differences, they have only two, which is A, that while Jamia and Shaheen Bagh reported the most severe riots from December, these localities were spared in February 2020. And secondly, that women were universal underlying theme of protest in February 2020, which was not the case in the violence from December 2019.
And now for the third WhatsApp group's alleged role, that is the Delhi Protest Support Group or the DPSG, that was created on 28 December 2019. For close to 2 months now, several members of some of these WhatsApp groups, that includes activists, filmmakers, civil society members, have been called in for questioning. We know that till now, more than 15 members of the DPSG WhatsApp group have been questioned by the investigation team. Documentary filmmakers like Rahul Roy and Sabha Devan were also summoned a week back to join the police probe. And recently, DU Professor Apurvanand's mobile phone was also seized by the Delhi police. And the police claim that the DPSG was created to give a gender, secular and media cover to this entire conspiracy. The police believe that based on this common conspiracy, the JCC, the DPSG, the UAH and the Pinjra Tor members were successful in creating 24/7 protests at 25 places, including Jamia Millia Islamia, Shaheen Bagh, Daryaganj, Patparganj, Chandbagh, Brijpuri Pulia, Jafrabad and Seelampur. The Quint has also reported on the DPSG in great detail and has not found any direct reference to incitement of violence before, during or after the protests from the exchanges on the WhatsApp group. For more details on that story, please check out the report on our show notes. And now coming to the actual action, that is the culmination of the Delhi riots, the police has been alleging that the violence was being planned to time it around US President Donald Trump's visit to India. And there was a big hole in that claim that the Quint had covered in an exclusive report that now the police seems to be covering up. Aishwarya explains.
Yeah, I heard. So, when it comes to what the police is saying is the execution of conspiracy, there are two meetings that are important to analyze. The first one is a meeting that happened on the 8th of January, according to the police in their own charge sheets that were filed 3 months ago in June. Now, we've done our investigation on that charge sheet, and basically what the police was saying then was that on the 8th of January, Tahir Hussain, who's AAP councillor, Umar Khalid and Khalid Saifi, who are United Against Hate members, they met at Shaheen Bagh on the 8th of January to decide together that they'll do a big blast when Trump visits. However, this 8th January meeting, for some reason, finds no mention in this charge sheet. It's important to note here that that the Quint, that we had broken the story regarding how it was virtually impossible for this trio to know about Trump's visit on the 8th of January, because there were literally no reports, formal, informal, no releases by the government, no media reports based on sources also, till then. Now the police in this charge sheet, after our report, of course, has completely dropped the claim of the 8th January meeting and has spoken about this meeting that happened on the intervening 9th of 16th and 17th February, where now the police is saying, and I'll quote, that in pursuance and furtherance of common conspiracy, a meeting of protest site leaders happened on the intervening night of 16th and 17th February at 2 a.m. It was decided in this meeting that a coordinated blockade of road would take place in Northeast Delhi during Donald Trump's visit. It also alleges that post the Chakka Jam, all protest site members will adopt violent measures to escalate the protest. This is interesting because the fact that they've dropped the 8th January, which was a core aspect of their initial charge sheets in the chronology that they were trying to build regarding the conspiracy, has completely been dropped here without giving any justification also. Because those charge sheets would say that this investigation will continue by the special cell. So we were expecting that there would be clarity regarding that in this charge sheet, but that has not happened.
Now, the riot that had broken out between 23rd and 26th February in areas of northeast Delhi such as Jafrabad, Mojpur, Gokulpuri, Chandbagh and Wazirabad localities ended up killing 53 people, a majority of whom were Muslims. However, before some of these areas had erupted into riots, the anti-CAA protesters had decided to conduct road blockades or Chakka Jam, which is an old and familiar form of protest in India, as we all know. So there was one in Selampuri and one in Jafrabad, for instance, which the police was constantly trying to scatter. But according to the police's version on what was happening before the riots was that, and I'm reading some words from the charge sheet, quote, in pursuance and furtherance of common conspiracy, end quote, members of the JCC held an urgent meeting where it was decided that they should immediately start reaching Jafrabad and other sites to block the road. By the night of 22nd February, the women at Selampur had blocked the Jafrabad road. And there were many more calls yet for people to go to the ground on the evening of 23rd February. But the police say that the gatherings weren't so much about blocking traffic as it was about sparking communal skirmishes. The charge sheet reads, and I'm quoting a line, quote, the blockade was to be followed by attack on police and non-Muslim population, end quote. But despite filing such a lengthy charge sheet, some puzzles still don't add up. And Aishwarya points out the loopholes.
Yes, of course. There are things that do not add up when you read about the 2,700 pages of this charge sheet. But before I get into that, let me quickly tell you guys about the reporting that the Quint has done on the Delhi riots, not only when they were unfolding, as and when they were unfolding, our team of reporters were on the ground then and brought you real voices from the ground, but we've stuck with the story even after the riots unfolded. So we've been consistent in our reportage of the charge sheets, of the various complaints, of following the virtual hearings, of bail applications, of court orders. And we've been tracking the investigation. So if you want, to go to a place where you will be able to read about the Delhi riots investigation in great detail, then of course type Delhi violence probe in the Quint, and you'll come to a page where you'll be able to get some really, really strong, reliable reports from the Delhi riots investigation. Yes, so now let's get to the various loopholes, and there are 8 loopholes that we've come up with. The first one is, of course, regarding the 8 January meeting, which we've already discussed. What the police has failed to answer in this charge sheet is that, how is it that the trio would know about Trump's visit on 8 January? What they've done is they've not spoken about this 8 January meeting at all. Now, this is a very big shift in their narrative, because in the other charge sheets, they've repeatedly brought up the 8 January meeting, and they've said that the special cell is going to carry out the investigation forward. So we were expecting some answers there. However, they've completely almost forgotten about this 8 January meeting. So that's problem number 1. Then loophole 2 is regarding how a plan to facilitate protests or even carry out a Chakka Jam, which is a road blockade. At what point, according to the police, did this become a conspiracy to carry out violence against non-Muslims? That link is very unclear, and it's a very big claim to make. Point 3 is, the various WhatsApp groups examined by the police. The Delhi police has not been able to give us any clear evidence where violence is being incited here or planned here or even condoned here. Then there's number 4. The charge sheet has ignored the differences within the anti-CAA protesters. Let's take the example of Sharjeel Imam. Now, Sharjeel and Imam, according to the police, they've tried to portray him as somebody who had sway over the protests, despite calling it off. Now, A, yes, he did call it off weeks after the protest started, but B, there were various people within Shaheen Bagh who had vocally condemned him or vocally distanced themselves from him, rather, after, his speech, his controversial speech regarding the blockade of Assam went viral. So there were differences between anti-CAA protesters, which the police is not fully acknowledging. Then the fourth is regarding the differences in the DPSG group as well, which is similar to the Sharjeel Imam example. Now, there were people on the DPSG Delhi protest support group who were saying that the blockade should happen or it shouldn't happen. However, instead of appreciating the context behind the debate, it seems like the police is picking on a few messages to tag people with the role of a conspirator. Then the fifth one is regarding, there were genuine debates on whether the protest should be secular in nature or Muslim centric. But the police, in their charge sheet, presents the focus on the former, which is on the secular aspect, as an effort to deceive people. Again, this claim is not backed by anything. Now, it is not clear why some parts of the WhatsApp chats are to be taken at face value, while others are to be dismissed as an effort at deception. Then we have, two aspects, 7 and 8, regarding the changes between the December and the February violence. Now, the police has found similarities and dissimilarities, which we've already discussed. Now, the two aspects that the police has completely not touched upon are A, now this is the seventh loophole, that in December, the clashes were primarily between the police and the anti-CAA protesters, which was either Jamia or Daryaganj or Northeast Delhi. However, in February, the pro-CAA or the pro-Hindutva activists also got very involved. There is plenty of evidence for this in the form of testimonies, complaints, and videos that we ourselves have reported on. The second aspect, which is the eighth loophole, is regarding there being a steady increase in pitch from the pro-CAA side as well, which is completely gone ignored. There were statements made by BJP leaders like Anurag Thakur, Kapil Mishra, Pravesh Verma in the run-up to the Delhi elections. There were videos by Hindutva leaders like Narsinghan and Saraswati. There were attacks on the anti-CAA protesters in Jamia and Shaheen Bagh by gunmen who were pro-CAA. And of course, Kapil Mishra and Ragi Tiwari's appearances in Northeast Delhi, while the riots began, during the riots. So considering that 2/3 of those people who've died in the Northeast Delhi violence were Muslims, this other strand cannot be left addressed. So these bring us to a complete 8 loopholes that we found in the Delhi police's conspiracy charge sheet.
To read more details on this story, please check out the Quint's report on our show notes, and we'll be back with more on this charge sheet as well, so stay tuned. If you like listening to this episode, please subscribe to the Big Story playlist for episodic updates. We're live on Apple, Google Podcast, Spotify, JioSaavn, and most of the other popular podcast streaming platforms. For other podcasts, please log on to the Quint website and check out the podcast section. For any feedback, shoot an email to podcasts@thequint.com.
Thanks for listening. Log on to the Quint's website and check out our other podcasts.